Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Age of Mythology, which is finally going to get a remaster, remake, definitive edition, whatever Age of Mythology Retold is ultimately going to be. I do certainly hope that it's not just a remaster, but it's a remake. The reason I say that is that Age of Mythology, although an amazing game that myself and many others we enjoyed greatly over the years when we were growing up, or when it was originally released at any rate, we enjoyed it greatly. It has some great music, it has a great feel to it, but it does have quite a few problems. It has issues of design of the various races, factions if you will, the various missions in the campaign, balancing in multiplayer, design in multiplayer, plenty of issues abound. One of those big issues is of course the Chinese faction. They plainly suck. They're imbalanced, they're badly designed, and their campaign is the worst of all of them. Far lower quality than any other campaign in any Age game, really, overall, if you think about it. So a simple remaster is off the table as far as I'm concerned, if they're going to do this properly. If they don't decide to do it properly, if they just do a remaster but keep things largely as they are, it's not going to do so well from my perspective. Not just because of the Chinese situation, but because overall, the multiplayer balancing, or the balancing in the game in general, it leaves a lot to be desired. Sure, I imagine that if they really put a lot of work into it and started releasing patch after patch after patch, dealing with all the balance issues, the healing issue, the favor issue, the myth units, economic issues, etc., I'm sure they could improve on that. But I also think that there's severe limits in terms of what they can do with that. And even then, you'd still run into the issue of the campaign. Now, look, I've played a lot of the Age of Mythology campaign, again and again. I've played it on multiple difficulties. I've played it over the years when I was a kid. I was playing it, or a teen really, when it originally came out, and I started playing it. I loved it. I still love it to this day, but it's got issues. It's got issues in difficulty, design of missions, map design issues, even story issues. It's got a great feel for it, but in terms of the actual story itself, kind of leaves some things to be desired. I guess the best way I could describe the Age of Mythology campaign, the main one, is you're kind of playing an Odysseus campaign, though you're not playing Odysseus, you're playing Arcantos, and then his son Castor, as he goes around the world, meeting these new civilizations and dealing with their problems while on the hunt for a certain Cyclops. It's a very Odysseus style adventure. An Odyssey, really, except you have Odysseus as well. So I would hope that, story-wise, whether or not they change it, that's, from my perspective, less significant than whether or not they change the mission design. Because there's a lot of badly designed missions, be it difficulty map design, objective design. There's a lot of problems with that. Like, take the Troy missions, for instance. The second Troy mission. You start with the base of very little, and you're supposed to take down the gates of Troy. So how does this play out? Well, you enter into an hour-long slogfest with the defenders of Troy, building a massive Tier 4 army to take their gates. Now, this is appropriate. Troy is very formidable. And it would have been, had it not been for another thing. You go for all that effort, right? 40 minutes, an hour, to bust down the gates of Troy. And then you withdraw immediately to help Ajax, who's getting his ass whooped by a second Trojan army, and you lose everything. Like, all your efforts you put in it, it kind of breaks the flow from my perspective, to put all that effort to build such a massive force, and then to be like, oh yeah, nothing you did was really relevant. And this happens more often than not in a campaign, in quite a few missions. Though there are some that do have a logical conclusion, like the final, or one of the final Norse missions, where you're going for the well, and up until that point, you've been building a massive network of alliances, and when you attack the well, you get a massive army to do so. However, even this is undermined by the fact that the mission right after that has you basically starting with just your heroes and nothing else. So much for the massive army you've been building and all the effort you put in to get to the thing. It's like, nope, it all went away. And you can win that mission with the heroes. Then you have a major defense mission after that. Yeah, the pacing of the campaign could use some work, I feel, when it comes to it. And there's more. there's more. There's a lot more to it. You are limited in population based on the number of town centers you control. And this creates issues in terms of how many units you can recruit. Besides that, myth units create significant bottlenecks in population. There's problems with the balancing of the god power. Some are incredibly good, some are in point of fact, are very useless. Some gods are outright useless, like you never pick them over there. It's like, consider Hephaestus over Hera, right? Just consider that choice, the choice Greeks have to make if they're following Zeus. Be it in the campaign or in multiplayer. Like Hephaestus, like Hera gives you Medusae and a lightning spell. The lightning spell is good one time, but that's it. It's gonna be a one-use benefit, then it's over. Hephaestus gives you a major economic boost, very strong tank units that can dish out a lot of damage and take a lot of it. Sure, they can be killed even by the Medusa or Gorgons, but like overall, you're going to benefit a lot more going for Hephaestus. Not only that, but he also has an upgrade that makes your blacksmith upgrade significantly cheaper. So it's like you start cranking up armies far better, far more. Like those are the kind of issues that you see again and again and again. And then there's the difficulty of the missions. I've mentioned that the AI gets a lot of units. The Trojan situation is actually one of the least problematic ones, because then you start playing the Atlantean campaign in particular, where you're fighting hordes and hordes and hordes of enemies again and again and again. You can win, but you're not winning for clever strategy or tactics. No, you're abusing the AI. What you're doing, the best way to do it is build an incomplete wall. Leave a small gap. The AI is rarely going to attack your walls directly if you have a gap in another part. So you create a choke point, the AI ignores your walls, it attacks your narrow choke point where a couple of heroes or a few infantry units or a few myth units can hold down an entire army while your range units just slaughter them. And the thing is, this is one of the best way to, or probably the only way to beat some of these missions on Titan. That should go, that should be shoved down a pit, that kind of mission design. That kind of difficulty design. It's something that was avoided in Age of Empires 4, by and large. Some missions certainly were obnoxious, like one of the French missions where you're dealing with the tier 3 army when you only have tier 2 units and no gold. That was fairly terrible. But even that is far, far better than a lot of the crap you deal with in numerous missions in Age of Mythology. And again. Don't get me wrong. As I've said, it's a great game. It's a fun game. But yeah, doing a remake would be the best choice as opposed to doing a remaster. And even if you don't have these issues with the campaign, understand that there's a lot of issues design-wise with the various civilizations, the various gods of said civilizations, and the power that some have and others don't. Could balancing improve on that? Sure. But I do think that they should go back to the drawing board with this and just start from scratch. Like, take the concept, take the ideas, take the main theme, by the way. That should be in the game, because it's one of the most iconic video game music or songs ever made. Take that, keep that, right? Keep the style of the campaign, of the adventure that you're on, but rebuild it from scratch. That's my perspective on what they should do. What will they do? Well, that is an interesting question. We don't know. All we know is that they're making Retold. We don't know how it's going to be. We have no idea of how Age of Mythology Retold is actually, what it's actually going to be when they do release it. What are they going to, is it just a definitive edition with another name? If that's the case, well, I would suspect that if they wanted to just make it a definitive edition, they wouldn't have, right? They wouldn't have named it Retold. They would have named it Age of Mythology Definitive Edition. They've decided to go Retold, so based on the title. And also, I remember an interview where some of the developers, some of the people in Microsoft, some of the people working on the Age games, they were asked about Age of Mythology, and they said, well, they basically said that they would have to redo it. That was my impression from it. I would probably need to find an exact quote of that, but the impression I got from that interview is that they would have to redo it. And I think personally that just a simple definitive edition wouldn't work. There's too many design issues, too many balance issues, too many problems in campaign maps and multiplayer maps. Because the town center situation, right? Your population being severely limited unless you have town centers, and town centers giving you a great deal of power. Well, a lot of the maps don't necessarily support that kind of playstyle, by the way. Just worth saying when it comes to it. Like, there's issues when you've got severe population limitations, and those population limitations are worse when you factor in myth units. And then to overcome that, you need town centers. I would say it also makes fights less interesting because of the population cap, right? Because in Age of Empires 2, you can get a huge army. And one of the big discussion points, right? Or one of the things we have to factor in when we're playing multiplayer match in H2 is like, how much of that population do we want to devote to our economy versus how much do we want to devote to our army? Like, are we running with 100 units in our army and 100 villagers, or are we running with fewer villagers but more of our army? Because there's a trade-off, a pretty huge trade-off. In Age of Mythology, it's less than that, partly because, myth units take a lot. And when it comes to myth units, some are great, some are amazing, right? They do an amazing job. Others less so. Like with the Egyptians, Anubites, they're fast, they can do a lot of damage, but they're also very, very easy to take down. And it's not like they're so cheap, favor-wise at least. It's not that, like, that's the thing, by the way. They might be cheap on other resources, but they still require a decent amount of favor. And it's like, do you want to spend that favor on fucking Anubites, or do you want to spend that favor on incredibly powerful upgrades? Like, for instance, upgrades that would make you being able to spam units from the Migdal Stronghold, for instance, in Tier 4, like there's no tomorrow. But even then, you're still limited by a population. But there's something to be said about the Egyptians once they start getting all the upgrades, especially if you go down a particular skill tree and with certain gods. You get so much from the Migdal Stronghold, and you get units so fast, and your economy is also pretty good to begin with. You combine all of those, it's like you just Zerg your enemy. Like, they're the closest to being a Zerg civilization in the game. Some other civilizations, like the Atlanteans, have issues as far as I see it. Like, it might say, oh, they have fewer workers. Yeah, but there's a lack of flexibility with them, partly because of that. Though their workers are certainly worth a lot, they do have some issues. They do have great god powers, or rather, they don't have great god powers, but that's balanced out by the fact they have multiple uses, which gives you a lot more flexibility on the battlefield. But yes, there's a lot of issues. I could go more in depth, but my basic point is this. It needs a remake. Not just a remaster, not just fancy new graphics. It needs redesign. Pretty much from the ground up. Keep the concepts, keep the main theme, keep the story, if you will, but everything else, like the way the missions are designed, all that kind of stuff, should be changed from the ground up. I also like, not historical accuracy, but like, I guess you could say authenticity. Because, for instance, you go to Troy, it's like, where's Hector? Where's Achilles? Are they dead? Well, you actually see Achilles in one of the cinematics, even though he's not mentioned by name, but it's like, that's his model, right? So I would like a more faithful rendition of the Trojan War, as an example. Even if you're showing up at the very end, it would be like, why is Ajax alive, for instance? Why is that never covered, as an example? I think that would be good. Or keep the story as it is. That's not the biggest problem. Far from it, right? Keep the story as it is. That's not the biggest problem. But yeah, a lot of the gameplay and missions need to be redesigned, as far as I see it. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you next time. And hopefully, we will see good news when it comes to Age of Mythology. Stay tuned.